15 years and not even a handshake. I'm Harvey Wilson, 51 years old, senior driver at Highvale Syndicate Freight out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Been with them since they had just 3 trucks and a dream. Now they had 28 rigs, contracts with some of the biggest distributors in the Midwest, and a new operations manager who didn't know the first thing about loyalty. When Highvale got bought by some investment firm last spring, I knew changes were coming. Just didn't think they'd start with me. The new ops manager, Darren Kelly, had an MBA and slick shoes that had never seen the inside of a truck cab. He'd been eyeing my salary for weeks, making comments about legacy costs in meetings. That morning I'd pulled in from a 3-day haul to Denver, on time like always, when Darren called me into his glass-walled office. The termination papers were already printed out. My replacement, some kid fresh out of driving school, was waiting in the break room. "We need to streamline operations," Darren said, not meeting my eyes. "It's nothing personal, just numbers. Your salary's nearly double what we can pay a new driver." I nodded, didn't argue. Didn't tell him that Thompson Foods had been shipping exclusively with us for 8 years because I helped their dock manager move his mother's furniture when the nursing home closed. Didn't mention that Western Distributing renewed their contract 3 times because I always found a way to make their emergency shipments happen, even on holidays. 15 years of perfect safety records. Never missed a delivery window. Known every client by name. "Severance is 2 weeks," Darren continued, pushing the papers across his desk. "Company policy." I signed without reading. Handed over my keys, my security badge, and my company credit card. Said thank you for the opportunity. In the parking lot, I sat in my pickup for almost an hour. Not angry, just thinking. About the clients who'd become something like friends over the years. About the Christmas cards I got from shipping managers across 6 states. About how this Darren didn't understand that in this business, shipments moved on relationships as much as diesel. My phone buzzed. Text from Bill Thompson himself. "Heard what happened. Those corporate idiots. Call me." Then another from Jerry at Western. "This true about you leaving? Let's talk before you make any decisions." By the time I pulled out of Highvale's lot, 3 more messages had come in. I didn't answer right away. Just drove home and sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange over the Oklahoma plains. They'd fired a driver but lost something worth a whole lot more. I started at Highvale back when it was just old man Jenkins and his son trying to build something. Jenkins taught me everything: how to navigate mountain passes in winter, how to talk to clients, how to solve problems on the road without calling in. "The freight business isn't about trucks," he'd say. "It's about trust." For 15 years, I'd built that trust 1 mile at a time. When the big ice storm hit Kansas City in 2016, I was the one who got the medical supplies through to 3 hospitals. When floods washed out the main highway to Wichita, I found the back roads. When Thompson Foods needed an emergency shipment of packaging after a warehouse fire, I drove straight through 36 hours to make it happen. My wife, Elaine, knew the drill. Sometimes I'd be gone for days, but I always came back with stories. Our kids grew up with me on the road half the time, but they never doubted I'd be there for the important stuff. Missed some baseball games, sure, but never a graduation or birthday. When Jenkins sold the company 5 years back, things started changing. Slowly at first, new policies, more paperwork, less flexibility. The new management kept me on because the clients asked for me by name. "Send Harvey," they'd say. "We know it'll get there if he's driving." Darren arrived 6 months ago, fresh from some big logistics outfit in Chicago. Started talking about efficiency metrics and driver rotation. Didn't understand why we let certain clients set their own delivery windows. Couldn't figure out why Thompson Foods got priority treatment. "They're not our biggest account," he'd argue in meetings. "No," I'd explain, "but they're our most loyal. Been with us since the beginning." He'd smile, that corporate smile. "Loyalty doesn't show up on balance sheets." I noticed the cracks forming. Started hearing whispers about rate hikes for our oldest clients. Saw how Darren hired drivers based on how little they'd work for, not how well they could drive. Watched him cut corners on maintenance. 3 weeks ago, I pulled him aside after he chewed out Dave, one of our best mechanics, for wasting time on preventative maintenance. "You're going to lose good people," I warned him. Darren laughed. Everyone's replaceable, Harvey. That's business 101. I didn't argue. Just went back to my roots, checking in with clients, making my deliveries. Keeping things running while the foundation cracked beneath us. Little did I know I'd be the first one they'd decide to replace. After sitting on my porch for an hour, I finally checked those messages. Bill Thompson wanted to meet for coffee tomorrow. Jerry from Western Distributing asked if I had plans to drive for another company. Maria at Lakeland Foods just sent a string of angry emojis followed by, "Call me." I went inside, made a pot of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. Elaine was working late at the hospital. The house felt too quiet. I pulled out my logbooks, 15 years of routes, deliveries, relationships. Highvale didn't own those. They'd fired the driver but forgotten about the connections I'd built. My phone rang. It was Jenkins. Must have heard the news through the grapevine. "Damn shame what they're doing to my company," he said, voice gruff with age and anger. "I never should have sold." "You did what you had to do," I said. "Your wife's medical bill." "Still," he cut in. "I built that place on relationships, not spreadsheets. These new boys don't understand the business." After we hung up, I stared at my hands, calloused, weathered from years of driving, loading, problem-solving. 15 years gone with a single signature. The next morning, I met Bill Thompson at Riverside Cafe. He didn't waste time. "I heard what happened," he said, sliding into the booth. "Bunch of idiots. You've personally saved our bacon more times than I can count." "Just doing my job," I said. "No," Bill shook his head. "You did more than your job. Remember when our cooling system failed at the Broken Arrow warehouse? You got that shipment to our backup facility at 2 a.m. in a snowstorm." I shrugged. "Freight doesn't wait for good weather." Bill leaned forward. "We've got a contract with Highvale, but it's got a 30-day termination clause. Who are you driving for next? Because that's where our business is going." I hadn't even thought about next steps yet, but Bill's words planted a seed. By lunchtime, I'd met with Jerry from Western, who said the same thing. By dinner, 3 more clients had reached out with similar messages. Driving home, I passed Highvale's yard, saw my old truck, already reassigned to that young driver. Through the office windows, I could see Darren in a meeting, pointing at charts on a screen. That's when it hit me. Darren saw drivers as interchangeable parts, but clients saw us as relationships. For 15 years, I'd been the face of Highvale to most of our major accounts. I wasn't just a driver, I was their trusted partner. I pulled into my driveway, mind racing. Called my buddy Frank, who'd left Highvale last year to drive for a competitor. "What would it take," I asked, "to start our own outfit?" Frank was quiet for a moment. "You serious about this, Harvey?" "Never been more serious in my life." "You'd need capital, licenses, insurance." He started listing. "And clients," I added, "which I've got." That night, Elaine found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by notes and calculations. "What's all this?" she asked. I think," I said slowly, "I'm starting a freight company." 3 days after being fired, I walked back into Highvale's office. Not to beg for my job, I was past that, but to collect the personal items from my locker and talk to a few of the drivers I'd mentored over the years. Darren spotted me in the break room, talking with Doug and Alejandro, 2 drivers who'd started under my guidance. His face darkened as he marched over. "Harvey, this is private property," he said. "You can't just walk in and disrupt operations." "Just collecting my things," I said, holding up my old thermos and the family photo that had been in my locker, "and saying goodbye to friends." Darren crossed his arms. "I've heard you've been talking to our clients." So that's what this was about. Word travels fast in the freight business. "They called me," I corrected, "to ask why I wasn't delivering their shipments anymore." "Well, stop it," Darren snapped. "Those are Highvale accounts. Interfering with our client relationships could be construed as tortious interference with business relationships." He pronounced each word like he'd rehearsed it with a lawyer. Maybe he had. "Can't control who calls me," I said, keeping my voice even. "Or what decisions they make about their shipping needs. Darren stepped closer. Listen carefully, Harvey. You signed non-compete and non-solicitation agreements when you joined Highvale. If you try to poach our clients, we'll bury you in legal fees. I hadn't expected this, couldn't afford a legal battle. 15 years of loyalty, and now they were threatening to sue me for taking phone calls. Check those agreements, I said, remembering something important. They expired after 10 years. Jenkins made sure of that. Darren's face flushed. He clearly hadn't done his homework. Regardless, he recovered. This is your one warning. Stay away from our clients. I nodded, picked up my things, and walked out. In the parking lot, Doug and Alejandro caught up with me. He's running this place into the ground, Doug muttered. Cutting corners on maintenance, pushing drivers to break hours of service rules. 3 guys quit last week, Alejandro added. Replace them with rookies who'll work for peanuts. I'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made my stomach tighten. Not just for the business implications, but for safety. Poorly maintained trucks and overworked drivers were a recipe for disaster. You two be careful, was all I said. Back home, I called Jenkins to ask about those agreements. He confirmed what I remembered. The non-compete and non-solicitation clauses had expired years ago. I never believed in tying people down forever, he explained. Good business is built on choice, not force. The next day, I got a certified letter from Highvale's lawyers anyway, threatening legal action if I continued soliciting their clients. Pure intimidation. They had no case, but they hoped I wouldn't know that, or couldn't afford to fight it. That same afternoon, Bill Thompson called. Highvale just tried to raise our rates by 15% with no explanation, he fumed. When I mentioned your name, their sales guy got all squirrely. One by one, similar calls came in. Highvale was scrambling to lock down clients using strong-arm tactics and sudden rate hikes. Classic desperation moves. That evening, Frank came over with pizza and beer. We sat on my back deck, hammering out a business plan. He'd already pulled together information on insurance, licensing requirements, and startup costs. The numbers were daunting but not impossible, especially if we started with just 2 or 3 trucks. We'd need a solid base of guaranteed contracts, Frank said, taking a swig of beer. I looked at my phone, which had been buzzing with client messages all day. I don't think that's going to be a problem. 1 week later, I was sitting in a small office I'd rented in an industrial park on the east side of Tulsa. Frank had tapped his 401k. I'd pulled money from savings, and together we'd secured financing for 2 trucks. Didn't seem like much compared to Highvale's fleet, but it was a start. We'd filed the paperwork to establish Wilson and Reynolds Freight LLC, applied for our DOT authority, got the insurance squared away, expensive, but our clean driving records helped. Even found a decent used truck that would be ready next week. What I hadn't expected was the call from Patty, Highvale's longtime dispatcher. Harvey, you got a minute? Her voice was hushed like she was hiding in a bathroom or storage closet. Always, Patty. What's going on? It's worse than you know, she said. After you left, Darren brought in some consultant who's been going through all the contracts, looking for ways to squeeze more money out of everyone. She paused, and I heard paper shuffling. But that's not the worst part. They're planning to shut down the Tulsa operation entirely in 6 months. Move everything to Kansas City where they've got some tax incentive deal. Everyone here is getting laid off. They just don't know it yet. The news hit me like a physical blow. Highvale had been a Tulsa fixture for decades. 40-some families depended on those jobs. How sure are you about this? I asked. 100%. I saw the documents myself when I was filing. Darren left them on his desk, real careless. They've already started looking at warehouse space in Kansas City. After she hung up, I sat at my empty desk, staring at the wall. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all the people who'd be blindsided 6 months from now. Frank arrived with coffee and donuts, excited about the used Peterbilt he'd found at a good price. He stopped short when he saw my face. What happened? I told him what Patty had shared. His expression hardened as I spoke. So all this talk about efficiency and streamlining was just smoke, he said. They were planning to dump everyone anyway. Seems that way. Frank sat down, Coffee forgotten. We need to think bigger, Harvey. What do you mean? If they're shutting down in 6 months anyway, we should be planning to pick up as much of that business as possible. Not just a client here and there. All of it. He was right. This wasn't about getting back at Darren or even saving my own career anymore. It was about preserving what Jenkins had built. The relationships, the trust, the jobs. We spent the rest of the day revising our business plan, called our bank contact about financing for more trucks, researched warehouse space that could serve as a modest terminal. By evening, we had the outlines of something much more ambitious than our original 2-truck operation. The next morning, I called Jenkins and asked him to meet me for lunch. I laid out everything. What Patty had told me, what Frank and I were planning, the challenges we faced. The old man listened quietly, hands folded on the table. When I finished, he nodded once. "How much do you need?" he asked. "Sir?" "For startup capital. I've got some money set aside, was saving it for a fishing boat, but this seems more important." I hadn't expected this. "We couldn't ask you to." "You're not asking." Jenkins cut me off. "I'm offering. Those people at Highvale, most of them I hired myself, known their families for years. I'll be damned if I'll sit by while some corporate vultures scatter them to the wind." He pulled out his checkbook right there in the restaurant. "Let's build something right this time," he said. "Something that lasts." Over the next 2 weeks, Wilson, Reynolds, and Jenkins Freight took shape with startling speed. Jenkins' investment, combined with our own resources and a business loan, gave us enough capital to lease 5 trucks, secure a small terminal with a warehouse, and hire key personnel. We started with the essentials. Patty gave notice at Highvale and joined us as dispatcher. 2 experienced mechanics followed, sick of Highvale's corner cutting on maintenance. We hired 5 drivers, all veterans with stellar safety records who had either already left Highvale or were planning to. The trucks arrived, 3 Peterbilts and 2 Kenworths. Nothing fancy, but solid, reliable machines. We painted them midnight blue with silver trim, our new company logo on the doors. Each morning, I'd arrive at our modest terminal before dawn and feel a surge of pride seeing those trucks lined up, ready to roll. Meanwhile, Highvale was spiraling. After I left, 3 major clients had pulled their business, not to us, not yet, but to competitors. They'd cited service concerns, but really they were just waiting to see if our new operation could handle their needs. Word of the Kansas City move had leaked. Morale at Highvale was rock bottom. Drivers were jumping ship weekly. Deliveries were being missed. Darren was in full panic mode, slashing rates to keep clients while cutting corners everywhere else. We moved carefully, building our infrastructure before taking on too much business. Jenkins insisted on doing things right. Proper training, thorough maintenance protocols, fair pay scales. "The money will follow if we focus on quality," he kept saying. By the 3rd week, we were ready to approach clients directly. I started with Thompson Foods, my longest relationship. Bill Thompson met me in his office, examined our rate sheets, insurance certificates, and driver qualifications, asked tough questions about capacity and contingency plans. "This all looks solid, Harvey," he said finally. "But Highvale just dropped their rates below yours. They're desperate to keep us." "They can't sustain those rates," I replied, "and they can't match our service, plus there's something you should know." I told him about the Kansas City move. Bill's face darkened. "So all their promises about local service and quick response times will be impossible to keep once they relocate." Bill nodded slowly. "We'll need to phase this transition carefully. Can't afford any supply chain disruptions." "We've got a plan for that," I assured him, outlining our gradual implementation strategy. By the end of the meeting, we had a handshake deal. Thompson Foods would move 20% of their shipping to us immediately, with the rest transitioning over 60 days. Similar conversations played out with Western Distributing, Lakeland Foods, and 6 other major clients. Not all signed immediately, but most started shifting portions of their business our way. We weren't just taking clients. We were taking the good people too. Every week, another Highvale employee would approach us looking for work. We couldn't hire them all, but we took the best. Experienced dispatchers, skilled mechanics, reliable drivers. Then came the moment that confirmed we were on the right path. Doug, the driver I'd mentored who was still at Highvale, called one evening. "Harvey, you won't believe this. Darren just announced they lost the Cornerstone Builders account." Cornerstone was Highvale's biggest client, 30% of their business. "What happened?" "Word is they found out about the Kansas City move from one of their contacts at Western. They've already signed with someone else." I asked the obvious question. "Who'd they sign with?" Doug laughed. "That's the best part, not you guys. They went with National Logistics. Darren's been running around screaming that you somehow engineered it, but everyone knows it's his own fault. The plan was working better than we'd hoped. We didn't need to actively poach all of Highvale's business. The company was imploding on its own. 2 months after being fired, I was back behind the wheel, delivering a critical shipment to Thompson Foods. Their main production line had suffered a breakdown, and they needed replacement parts by morning, just like old times. Except now the truck I drove had my name on the door. As I backed up to Thompson's loading dock at 4 a.m., Bill himself was waiting, despite the early hour. "You're a lifesaver, Harvey," he said as I handed him the manifest. "Our production manager says we can be back online within 2 hours now." I helped unload, then joined Bill in his office for coffee. He seemed distracted, checking his phone repeatedly. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just waiting for confirmation on something," he said, pouring more coffee. "Should be any minute now." His phone buzzed. He read the message, then smiled. "It's official. As of this morning, we've terminated our contract with Highvale. You're now handling 100% of our freight." I knew this was coming. We'd been gradually taking on more of their business, but hearing it formalized still felt momentous. "Appreciate your trust," I said simply. "Trust is why you got it," Bill replied. "But you should know you're not the only one. Western Distributing cut ties with them yesterday. Lakeland Foods the day before. From what I hear, Highvale has lost 80% of their Tulsa business in the last 6 weeks. On the drive back to our terminal, I passed Highvale's yard. The lot was half empty. A for lease sign had appeared on the fence. Through the office window, I could see Darren on the phone, gesturing frantically. I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected. Just a quiet sense that things were working out as they should. We hadn't stolen anything. We'd simply built something better, something based on the values that had always mattered in this business. Back at our terminal, Jenkins met me in the break room. "Have you heard?" he asked. "About Highvale losing most of their clients?" "Yeah." Jenkins shook his head. "More than that. They're declaring bankruptcy, effective immediately." 6 months after being fired from Highvale, I stood in the yard of Wilson, Reynolds, and Jenkins Freight, watching our fleet, now 15 trucks strong, head out for the day's deliveries. Our small terminal had expanded to include a proper warehouse and maintenance facility. We employed 32 people, most of them former Highvale workers. Highvale Syndicate Freight no longer existed. After the bankruptcy, their assets had been liquidated, their contracts scattered to various competitors. We'd acquired 3 of their trucks at auction, good machines that had been poorly maintained. Our mechanics had spent weeks getting them back into proper shape. Darren had left town. Last I heard, he'd taken a position with a logistics firm in Phoenix. The investment group that had bought Highvale from Jenkins had written off the entire venture as a loss. Jenkins joined me in the yard, leaning on his cane. At 73, he wasn't actively managing day-to-day operations, but he came by most mornings to have coffee with the drivers and share his wisdom. "Never thought I'd be back in the freight business," he mused, watching a Peterbilt pull out loaded with industrial equipment bound for Kansas City. "Having regrets?" I asked. He laughed. "Hell no. Best decision I've made in years." We walked back inside where Patty was coordinating the day's routes. Frank was reviewing maintenance schedules with our lead mechanic. The place hummed with purposeful activity. "You know what makes this work?" Jenkins said, pouring himself another cup of coffee. "It's not the trucks or the contracts or even the capital. It's the people." He wasn't wrong. We'd built something valuable because we valued the right things. That afternoon, I took a rare day off. Drove out to the lake with Elaine, Sat on the dock with fishing poles, not really caring if we caught anything. Happy? She asked simply. I considered the question, watching the sun glint off the water. Yeah, I said. I am. Sometimes the long haul isn't about the miles. It's about the journey back to what matters.